Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar or new to the podcast, I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. Today, I'll be speaking to Fabricio Miranda, the CEO and co-founder of Flieber, a business that helps e-commerce sellers maximize sales through inventory and supply chain optimization. Fabricio explains the ripple effects a poorly optimized supply chain can have on your business and the foundations that sellers can put in place to ensure they are never out or understocked. We discuss the problems that DT sellers are currently facing due to the supply chain crisis and the solutions that they can put in place to ride out the storm. Fabricio also shares stories from his time as an Amazon FBA seller and reveals a secret sauce that helped him make over $10 million in sales within his first few years. I don't want to give away too much just yet, so let's dig in and see what Fabricio has to share. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. I am really excited to be joined by today's guest. We have Fabricio Miranda on with us today. So Fabricio, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Sarah?
I'm doing super well. I'm super excited to have you on. I know that we've got quite a few really big topics to go through today, not to mention you've got a super interesting story. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it and just happy to have you on.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. Well, just wondering, where are you in the world right now? I'm sure people are out there curious.
Yeah, I'm in Manhattan. I'm in our office in Manhattan. We have people all around the world. We have people in 8 countries, but our main office is in Manhattan.
Awesome. I know Manhattan during the summer is like the place to be. So you're well stationed, ready to kick off the season.
Yeah, at this season, yes.
Awesome. So I was going through a lot of, your kind of background story. I know you've told this story before, and so you've probably got it down well packed. But for those who don't know you, walk us through how your entrepreneurial journey got started and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur pretty much since 26 years old. And I'm from Brazil originally, so I was an entrepreneur there forever. And I was involved in the sale of a water treatment company. That was the last thing I did in Brazil. I decided that I was going to move to the US with my family. I needed a work visa here in the US, so I decided to open a hedge fund here in Manhattan. I had relatively easy access to capital at the time. I was able to raise capital, open this hedge fund called Victory Capital, which is still running successfully up to today. But 2.5 years into that, I met this guy who was opening an Amazon store. And that made me really intrigued because I didn't even know that was a thing at the time. I thought it was something you were doing between jobs to get an extra money. But this guy was very capitalized, very smart. And I decided to go out for a glass of wine and understand what he was doing. In the very beginning, he asked, Fabricio, how much % of retail do you think is online in the US developed country? Jeff Bezos was already one of the richest people on earth. Amazon was one of the biggest companies. All these boxes were arriving at my house every single day. So I answered, 35, 40%. And he said 8. When he said 8%, I knew that this was a much bigger revolution than I had envisioned before. So I decided to join him and open this business with a couple other partners. And we sold $10 million in the first year, which is great. But the best thing about it was that I understood how underserved this whole industry was. At the time, third-party marketplace sellers were already selling north of $100 billion on Amazon, and the tools that were available for them were very, very unsophisticated, very immature overall. So we saw the potential to start being involved in founding businesses to support this new industry. So I co-founded a lending business first. That was the first business, and the concept here is really simple. Basically, this is a capital-intensive business. You need money, and all these people exploring this business, a lot of them don't have access to traditional lines of credit. So there was a gap between the demand for capital and the offer of capital. And this company today is one of the biggest companies in this industry. I also co-founded advertising platform, which today is the largest e-commerce cross-channel ad platform in the market. And I co-founded Flieber. Flieber is the reason why we're talking here. We're a leading inventory optimization platform. So that's pretty much my entrepreneurial journey.
Quite a few stakes in the fire, as they say, that you had going there. Just listening to that, one of the first things that came to my mind was thinking you went from having a hedge fund, this very structured, kind of well-respected world, to all of a sudden your attention is caught by Amazon and something that, it was built out, but still like relatively big jump to go from hedge fund to Amazon. Was there a little bit of like, I don't know, did you have to kind of convince people like, hey, I'm doing the right thing here, I really see the potential? Or I don't know if you faced any challenges either internally, externally, because in my mind, those are two like very different worlds.
Yeah, everybody still think I'm crazy. I think today with all the companies and the success of some of them, I think people understood the dynamics. And also today it's a much bigger industry. But at the time, everybody thought it was crazy. As I also thought, because I was just joining because I knew this was a big revolution, we didn't know where this would lead us. None of us had any experience with retail. We were basically learning on the fly and trying to, do things in a way that we would make money at the end of the day. But yes, everybody thought it was crazy.
No, I thought it'd be worthwhile asking because it is one of those things that I'm sure you're not alone. When you see the potential in a market and you see, oh, wait, there's a revolution at play, I'm going to make the jump and I'm going to take the leap into this. There's certainly a leap of faith, and you have to do not only just convincing other people, but convincing yourself. And I think we don't get the chance to talk about that often. So that was one of the immediate things I thought of when I heard that story. I just thought it was interesting. Now, granted, you also have this interesting angle because you got into Amazon, and it sounds like you hit the ground running. You became very successful within your first number of years. So how did you do that? How did you make over $10 million in sales during those first years as an Amazon seller? What was the secret to your success there?
I think it was a lot related to the moment of the industry. At that time, the industry didn't have a lot of people that were experienced business people with background in business, having done business before. There was a lot of people just exploring and trying to make some money and looking for deals. And from the start, we looked at this thing as a company. We raised $5 million. We started the business with $5 million in the bank. We had also capital from the partners involved in this. And because of the moment of the industry, we were able to accelerate things. But I think the real secret in this whole thing was trying to build a model that is spitting out margins, profit. This is a business that has a lot of pressure on margins. A lot of people can't make money if you don't do things in like the right way. So from the beginning, we structured everything in a way that first was innovative. Since we didn't have any like paradigms from past experience, we're just doing things the way that we thought were the right thing. So we ended up being innovative, and we broke some barriers because of that. And second, focused on the business model, on a business model that is able to generate margins. So an example of the innovation is that we were one of the first in that company to send a full container to Amazon straight from China. And that completely changed our business because at that time we had 2 warehouses, and those warehouses had a total of 30 people just working on the floor, organizing things and packing things. And we had conveyor belts and all these things around trying to make the warehouses very efficient. And with the time that we were able to send a container straight from China to Amazon FBA changed our life because we could get rid of all these operations, and we got rid of the 2 warehouses. We got rid of a lot of people who were just there to make that possible. And we made the business a lot more efficient. So the end of HeadClicks, before we sold it in 2019, the end of the company was, the company is still operating. Our participation, the end of our participation of the company was basically 3 people in a room with 6 screens operating the business because we didn't have to have operations. So this kind of thing is what I think made us successful in this environment.
Super interesting that because it was a topic that I wanted to dig in on, this kind of innovation when it came to your shipping and storage costs. Something that came to my mind as you were talking about it was like, how in the world did you come up with the idea to shift your shipping strategy in the containers like you just described? Like, was there an aha moment where you went, okay, wait a minute, I think I've got a crazy idea, let's try this, and then it changed everything? Or was that maybe kind of the result of a lot of calculation over time?
No, it was an aha moment. I was in a taxi in China going from the hotel to a factory. And I was thinking in the taxi about some calculations that we had done about how much it cost for us to do a stop between the port and Amazon's FBA fulfillment centers. And that cost was calculated at the time to be at $1,500 approximately. And we were shipping, I don't even know how many, but north of 200 containers. So I saw the possibility of saving over $300,000 just by not stopping at a warehouse between the port and FBA. And I was at the taxi and I was thinking about my conversations. We used to use FedEx freight forwarders at the time, but I had met Flexport at the time. And I was thinking about my conversations with Flexport. They were very aggressive. They wanted to enter the market aggressively. And I thought, I'm just going to get this container from this factory that I'm going to. We used to sell placemats for dinner and tables. And the placemats were really, really cheap. And I was bringing a 20-foot container, which was, overall the cost of that full container was not that high. So I said, it's the best way for us to test this model. And let's ask Flexport to send it to Amazon. And they were up to the challenge and we did it. And I remember that for 30 days or something, I was like anxiously waiting to see if Amazon would even receive the container and open the seal of the container. And they did. And that moment changed their lives.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like you just said, the amount of savings that you were going to get just by that one shift, it's huge. It's huge for a business. So it sounds like that aha moment just changed everything. And I think, what kind of comes to me as I listen to that is it's like, okay, well, great. You found the secret to success. You killed it on Amazon. You streamlined all of your kind of shipping needs. Why leave? Why leave the Amazon business and go switch to something, more service related? What was the kind of opportunity that you felt like you wanted to pursue after that success?
I didn't leave the business initially. So we opened businesses in parallel to what we're doing. And they were all kind of spin-offs. So we saw that we had relatively easy access to capital. We saw that a lot of other people had the same problem that we had, that was long capital cycles and need for a lot of capital. So we decided to spin it off and create a lending business that today is one of the leading lending businesses in the market. And a little later, we saw that we had 6 people in a room full time trying to manage advertising with spreadsheets. And it was crazy. And we had only 220 SKUs at the time. So it was not even like thousands of SKUs as some sellers do. And it was already impossible to do it. And we also saw that if you did it in a certain way, which was one campaign per keyword, it would be a lot more efficient. So all of that happening, like 6 people in a room, everybody else must have this problem. Managing that is very hard. We created technology, we spun it off, and it's another company. So things came out of Flieber is the same thing. So we had a whole system for inventory optimization and supply chain visibility. And we kind of spun that off also. So it wasn't that we made a complete shift. We're spinning things off this company. But at the same time, I think the main thing is the market opportunity. I think I was involved in this business. It's one of those situations where at the right place at the right time. I was involved at a time that you really didn't have a lot of tools. And all these people that were selling hundreds of billions of dollars were demanding tools. They needed tools to make their businesses work. So it was a market opportunity pretty much.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't get to talk to people that often who, took their Amazon business. It's usually like a clean cut, like I had my Amazon business. I exited my Amazon business. Like it sounds like you did was almost it was like the roots to all these different opportunities, all these different businesses. And all of a sudden you're realizing quite a few gaps in the market. I find that fascinating. It sounds like just like a beautiful seed to a lot of new opportunities, which is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because you just mentioned Flieber and you said, okay, that is what kind of led way into this company. I wanted to talk to you about that gap in the market that you were identifying, especially because you saw first and foremost what optimizing your shipping and storage did for you. Can we talk about what you're doing and kind of helping sellers with today via Flieber?
Yeah. So during that time, when I started that business, I was involved in that business. My mind was that, okay, cool. We're going to have this fancy thing where we're going to be talking about product and talking about brand and sales and marketing. And in the end of the day, I was spending 80% of my time dealing with Chinese suppliers and freight delays and trucking delays and all these processes, bill of lading, all these documentation, performing voice. And I was like, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I wanted to do when I got involved in this business. So I saw that a lot of people might have the same feeling that I do. And I started testing this with people around and saw that whenever I was talking about being a retailer, a seller, e-commerce retailer, you never signed up for dealing with trucking delays. That was not what you wanted to do. So I saw an opportunity there because operations is something that is not sexy and it's very, very important at the same time. So we decided to start this business because of that, because it was a gap between what was happening and what people really needed.
Yeah. It's funny because you said that it's not the sexy part. And that's usually how I refer to it when I talk about it. It's one of those things. It's like you said, like no one signed up for dealing with that trucking issue. You kind of imagined yourself doing the fun bits of, the marketing the business, growing the business. And all of a sudden you're like just on the phone with the Chinese suppliers all day and having like a rude awakening. So it's like most sellers know this, right? Once they're in it, they're like, oh my gosh, I am completely overwhelmed by this super unsexy part of the business. And yet I still think that people struggle to really understand like the ramifications of when inventory optimization goes wrong. So I was wondering if you could just walk me through that because overstocking, stockouts, somehow sellers, they either overlook them or constantly struggle with them. Walk me through what that can do to a business and, why sellers need to just be a little bit more on top of those issues.
Online retail has been growing double digit forever. If you think about the growth of retail in the last decade, it was double digits every single year. It's natural that everybody focuses on selling more and trying to capture market share. And they dream of a day that they will make money because they now have all this market and they now can work with efficiencies. But the reality is that, as I usually say, the profit starts being done at the purchase of the product from the manufacturer. So if you don't think about the whole operations process before you think about the sales, it will not be profitable. That happens a lot with a lot of businesses online and offline. And you see the businesses almost every time they're either stocked out or overstocked because it's always a reaction to something that happened before. So you are stocked out and you pile up in inventory because you don't want to be stocked out anymore. And you trust that you're going to sell more and suddenly you're overstocked. And then you're overstocked and all your money is trapped in that inventory that you can't sell. You'll do promotions, you'll sell it at a cost, and then you are stocked out again. So that's how most businesses operate in retail overall. And I'm not talking only about small Amazon sellers. I'm talking about even huge businesses that we deal with, both online and offline. They operate that way. And why they operate that way? Because they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the visibility. They don't have the data. They don't have a real-time data structure. So there's a bunch of things around that leads to this stock out situation. Retail is becoming more and more complex. If you think about the future of retail, you have now all the companies operating online and offline. You have a mix of D2C and wholesale. So everyone wants to sell everywhere they can. And it's really easy to sell to those channels today because you're only one click away from selling in another channel. But inventory is physical, and inventory has to flow through all those channels and all that structure. So inventory will be at the center of complexities moving forward. And if you don't put inventory at the center of your decisions, you will not be able to have a business that is profitable in the end of the way. So that's why I'm so bullish. I invest 100% of my time today to Flieber because this is the biggest problem, the hardest problem to solve, and we're tackling it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the way you just put that. I mean, I think you've just teed me up for my next question here because you're talking about inventory really being pivotal, being core to just the success of the business. But maybe for those who don't know, what would you say are the core pillars of well-optimized inventory and supply chain system or strategy?
I love talking about the similarities between ways that you use in your car to go from point A to point B and supply chains, the way the supply chains are going to operate in the future. So if you think about Waze, before Waze, you had a GPS, and the GPS had a static route. You would basically put your address, you would give you a route that was already pre-programmed, and you would follow that route, and you would be stuck in traffic, and nothing would be done in the middle of the way. And then after some iterations comes Waze, the idea that routes cannot be static because things happen. along the way. So Waze gives you a tentative route, which is the first route that it gives you. Start following that route. And in the first intersection, it has new data, collects that data, and understands if that route is still the best one to be followed. If not, it will reroute you to another route. And it will do that in every single intersection along the way. So the efficiency of Waze is actually the sum of a bunch of different forecasts of the best route and rebalances around along the way. If you move that to supply chains, it's kind of the same thing. So today we operate in the GPS era of supply chains where we think supply chains are static. So we define that today we need to order 1,000 units to send to, a warehouse, a 3PL in the US in August of this year. And you're going to push that to your supplier, and someone else in your company will do everything needed for you to have 1,000 units arriving in August at the 3PL in the US. So that is, similar to the GPS. It's a static process. Nothing changes. Our vision is that we're building something more closer to what Waze, which is a rebalancing system. So basically, between the time that you decide to have the 1,000 units and the time that those 1,000 units are in inventory, a lot of things change. You're talking about 3 months, sometimes 6 months. We have customers that do that 18 months in advance. Can you imagine how many things change in 18 months? So being able to rebalance along the way in a way that you're sent to production 1,000 units because that's what you think you need. But at the end of production, you know that you're better off splitting that between 800 units sent to the US and 200 to send to Europe. And you put those 800 units on a vessel and they're coming to the port. And at the port, you identify that 3PL is not the best destination anymore. It's best for you to split 500 to that 3PL and 300 to something else. So I'm just explaining here, giving some ideas of nodes of decision, which in Waze is similar to intersections that you can make different decisions. So the future of supply chain is going to be an adaptive supply chain. So being able to adapt your supply chain and being able to create nodes of decision where you can reevaluate and being able to keep reevaluating along the way to see what is the next best action. That is the first critical thing. Second critical thing is connecting sales and inventory. So in history, if you go to any company, any retailer, you have a sales team, you have an operations team, and you have the S&OP meeting, which is where the only time when they talk. It's not a real time thing. It's like they get together and talk about the planning and then they go their ways again. And in our vision, the new world of retail, the modern retail, is a retail where these two things, sales and inventory, are interconnected in real time. So let me give you an example of a real case here at Flieber. We have a customer that is a coffee company, sells coffee. He was selling coffee only on Amazon in 2019. He sold $1.5 million in coffee, and suddenly COVID hits. When COVID hits, our system starts saying, hey, we have a forecasting feature in our system, and it starts saying, hey, you're going to sell, the forecasting is projecting sales to go up, so you need to replenish sooner. So we sent a message, an alert, hey, replenish this product. And then 2 days later, things picked up even more. Hey, send another batch. And 3 days later, another batch, up to the moment that it was impossible to send a new batch before they ran out of stock. So then another feature of our system, which is sales adjustments, starts alerting, saying, hey, you're going to run out of stock of this product. You don't have time to replenish anymore, so you have to work with your sales lever. Then we also calculate what is the ideal sales that you have to sell to survive that stock out. And then that alert, they started reducing advertising. It wasn't enough. They started increasing price up to a moment where they were the only ones selling coffee on Amazon at a certain moment of COVID. And in 1 year, they went from $1.5 million in sales to $6.5 million in sales, just because of this interconnection between inventory and sales. The idea that you have two levers to work with. Of course, you want to have inventory to sell everything you want to sell. But since inventory is the only physical things in this new world, it's natural that inventory will have bottlenecks, will have problems, will have setbacks. So you have to have the lever of sales in these cases to adjust your route.
Listening to that, the burning question on my mind is, how in the world are you able to do that with the amount of uncertainty that we have in the world right now? I mean, it's impressive enough that the system was able to predict that as the pandemic hit and buying patterns started to change. But then, I mean, now we're a couple years into the pandemic and we've got all sorts of new levels of uncertainty today that are affecting the supply chain. I mean, is the data able to stay ahead of all that?
It's not, in a lot of cases, it's not. You cannot predict COVID, for example. It's impossible. You can have the most modern systems with the largest possible amount of data. You will not predict COVID. What you can do is to quickly react to things that are happening, which is what happened to our system. So as soon as sales start picking up, we start seeing a different trend, which is a trend that is different than the historical trend. So we understand that that is not a seasonality. It's something different that is going on. And we start alerting the customers about that. So it's going up. Pay attention to it. If it continues going up, you need more inventory. And the next day it goes up again. The next day it goes up again, up to a moment that you understand that this is a serious trend. And all your algorithms start understanding that as a new level of sales. So that is, I think, the main thing today that everybody has to understand is that for the first time in history, we have real-time data available from almost every source. So you have a lot of people digitizing verticals of supply chain. You have companies digitizing production management like Envil, which is our partner. You have companies digitizing freight like Flexport, which is also a partner. You have companies digitizing trucking like Convoy. You have companies digitizing fulfillment like Deliver. So all of these verticals are being digitized. And for the first time, you have access to all of that data. We collect data from all those sources, by the way, and we feed our system with that data. And having real-time data gives you a visibility of what's happening that completely changes your world, because now you can not only see what's happening today, but you can start predicting much better what will happen in the future with the trends that you see happening. And that's pretty much what our system is doing in real time. We're collecting data from these sources and trying to understand how that data is going to influence in your future inventory needs so that we can be ahead of time. So answering your question, sorry for the long answer, but answering your question, it is impossible to predict many things. It is impossible to deal with some of the uncertainties, but it is possible to be ahead of most of other people who don't have that data and that capability, to be ahead of them in making the best decisions.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said related to something that popped up as listening to you there. You know, all that data combed together from all those different sources, obviously quite key to the success of a business, and the way that you just lined out what happened to your coffee seller and how they were able to exponentially grow during one of the most tumultuous times in our recent history, I think is telling enough. But I guess what pops into my head is going, okay, you know, are sellers going to have to take that holistic approach to inventory optimization and management and really get into their data in the way that you just described in order to stay ahead? Like, is that now going to be the key for success for anybody, especially navigating the supply chain crisis?
Yeah, I deeply believe that, yes. If you think about traditional retail, it was all based on products being on a shelf to enable sales. So the whole infrastructure of supply chain was developed around that. So the whole infrastructure of supply chain was developed for you to have massive quantities being produced by a supplier, and you put that in containers, vessels, ports, trucks, distribution centers, distributed across thousands of shelves just to enable sales, even before you sell anything. So even if you're selling 10 units per day, you still need to have hundreds of thousands of units spread across this whole chain. In modern retail, if you're selling 10 units a day, you just need to have 10 units to deliver to the final customer. So it is a shift in business model, is a structural shift that we're seeing today. And if companies don't adapt to this shift, they're going to be behind, because it's a new model. You need to operate according to this new model. We're not yet developed enough because it demands investments in infrastructure, which is what a lot of companies are doing. You see Flexport being worth $8 billion doing freight forwarding digitization because they are trying to enable this new world to happen. So I talk a lot with Flexport about, for example, how do you move from having a container as a unit to having a pallet as a unit at the same cost? Because today, if you have a pallet, you're having to bring LCL, which is less than container load, and you're paying a premium. You're paying 4 times the price of a container. How do you make that the same price or even cheaper, so that now you can start thinking not about a full container, but you can start thinking about a pallet, which gives you a lot more flexibility to deal with inventory? And then how do you move from pallet to a package? How do you make a package as cheap to move as it is a container to move today? So those things demand time. I deeply believe that in the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to see a major shift in the way supply chains operate. But I think it's a path with no return. I think you have to adapt to this new situation because it's a new business model.
Mm. Based off the varying businesses that you work with, and it sounds like you really see kind of all the different corners of the supply chain and what you're doing now with Flieber, what are the greatest mistakes that entrepreneurs are making at the moment, and what's keeping them back from scaling their businesses?
I think it's playing the catch-up game. I think this is a mistake that a lot of retailers that I see around, they make that mistake of having a disconnected structure between inventory and sales. And you have the sales team doing promotions and changing advertising and all these things related to the product, completely blind to what is the future inventory impact of those changes. And you have inventory trying to play the catch-up game and bringing things by plane with no margin because they need to catch up with what sales is doing. And in the end of the day, it's a lose-lose because you're selling at a lower margin because you're either reducing price or increasing advertising, and you're selling with a higher cost because you're having to operate with a higher cost to play this catch-up game. So understanding that those two things have to be combined. You have every sale decision that you make have to be connected with what is the inventory impact of that decision. That is almost obvious, but for some reason, nobody does that way. I think it's because there's no systems doing that. Before what we're doing at Flieber, there were not a lot of systems doing that. That's the only explanation that I can see for that, but it's so obvious. And I think that's the biggest mistake. If you solve only that part and you're able to have full visibility of your sales pattern, full visibility of the impact of your sales decisions in the future inventory availability that you're going to have, you are able to completely revolutionize your business already because you're able to operate with better margins because you were selling better and better margins because you have a lower cost of operation. So you gain on the two fronts.
I know you're talking about this in a way, but I want to make sure that we don't leave any stone unturned here. When you're talking about those systems and those systems being obvious, walk me through what are the systems and measures that they can put into place now that's going to help them kind of navigate this crazy time that we're going through and any of the future changes. I know earlier you were talking about how supply chains are going to evolve in the future, but it's like, all right, what steps do I take today to fix this and to be prepared?
I think the first thing is you have to have a system that gives you visibility over your sales. So any system that can connect to your sales channels, or if you're big enough, to your ERP, analyze those sales for you and start projecting sales, start making you understand what you're going to sell in the future, what is your impact. So that's the first thing that you have to do is have full visibility of your sales and predict your sales pattern with the biggest possible accuracy. And here, just a parenthesis, I deeply believe that forecasts are highly overrated. A lot of people think that forecasts are going to solve the world, and they're not, because it's impossible for you to be very, very accurate to a point that, you can rely on the forecasts. So if you think that even for weather, for example, we're only 80% accurate for the next 5 days, in other words, we make 20% of the time we make mistakes for what's going to happen in the next 5 days. Can you imagine supply chain is dealing with 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12 months of time? So it's impossible to be 100% accurate. So you have to have accuracy, but you also have to have a way to react and rebalance things according to what happens in reality. So that's another point that is very important. So first is sales. Second thing you have to be able to manage really well is your production of your products. We mapped 73 steps between the moment that you define that you need to purchase something to the moment that something is already in inventory. So there's 73 steps, which is a lot. And by far, the mistake that most people do is not follow up. And humans are not good at following up with anything. So humans are like, you have a headache one day, you decide to not call them and you get screwed up because that call that you didn't make is going to result in you missing the next vessel. And the vessel after that one is going to be a week from now. So it's a long chain of consequences that you have. So humans are not good at that. So have a system to do that. And there are systems in the market. I talked about Envil already. They're a close partner. They have an amazing system for production management. So that's another thing that you have to understand is production. Third is inventory. So the first thing that we do at Flieber is a supply chain map. So it's a very intuitive, it's a 2-hour onboarding basically. And it's very intuitive supply chain map that you build with blocks. And you're going to define what are your suppliers, what are your warehouses, what are your fulfillment centers, what are your sales channels. And you're going to connect them, tell how they connect to each other so that our system knows what are the possible inventory movements that you have. And then you're going to start adding the lead times that you have for each one of those connections. So when you do that, you understand what are the options that you have. So for product A, you have an option to send from the supplier to this warehouse, or send to the supplier straight to the fulfillment, or maybe air from the supplier to the warehouse, or, you see the option. So having those options available, very, very important, because it makes you take the next best action in a good way. And then the last thing that I think is really important is what I said about the connection between the sales and the inventory. So knowing the sales, knowing the inventory movements, knowing the purchase and transfer status, and connecting all of that and making all of that connected. So I think if you do that, you're going to be in a very good position.
Yeah, I really like the way that you just mapped that out. One thing came to mind, and you were initially talking about the difficulty with trusting and forecasting. I don't even know if this is fair to ask you, and you can tell me if it's not, but those forecasts that you just described, being tasked with trying to convey, what shipping times are going to look like 3 to 6 months and things like that from now. I mean, how accurate are those? I mean, do you have like a ballpark percentage? And I know that's probably a pretty difficult question, but I'm very curious.
Yeah, no, we have all of that. And we split the products between A, B, C, and D products. A being the products that contribute with 20% of your sales. So imagine that you have a list of products, you organize them from the biggest seller to the lower seller, and then you start seeing what is the contribution of each product to the total sales, and you start summing those contributions. When you reach 20% combined, all those products are A products. And then you continue going up to 50%, all those products are B products. You continue going up to 80%, all those products are C products. And from 80% to 100%, it's the D products. So we split that because we think the priority of the accuracy of forecasts have to be the priority of the products. So basically, we aim at having very high forecast accuracy for A products, a little lower for B products, a little lower for C products, a little lower for D products. And the reason is because D products, for example, are products that you have very, very intermittent, we call intermittent demand. So you have 2 units today sold, 0 tomorrow, and then 10 the other day, and then 0 again. And it gets really hard for you to be very accurate in such a faulty pattern, I would say. For the A products, we aim at having above 87% accuracy in 3 months, meaning that if you have a 3 months period, 3 months from today, you have to have an 87% accuracy overall. We just had a case today. We're showing one of the customers today the accuracy report, and it was 94%, which is amazing, but it's not normal. The normal is between 84 and 87% for a 3 months period.
Wow.
Which people don't appreciate how high that is. It is a lot higher. If you get a moving average, for example, it is approximately 40% higher than a moving average accuracy.
I appreciate that breakdown because, like you said, I mean, it's one thing to go and forecast everything kind of based on a batch or a group. And it's like, no, it needs to be more granular than that. You really have to kind of really look at your products in a different way if you want to get this accurately. So I feel like a lot of people listening to this podcast right now, especially if they're in, the DTC space, Amazon space, are going, I have some food for thought here on how I need to be approaching my supply chain, especially with some of those future evolutions like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate, you taking me through all this, Fabricio. I know we've kind of hit on quite a few big topics for today. I tend to wrap up these interviews with just a couple rapid fire questions. If you're cool with that, I can move on to those.
Let's go.
Awesome. So what are the best hidden growth opportunities within inventory and supply chain optimization?
I think supply chain integration, which is what I was explaining, being able to integrate all those verticals that are being digitized. We call ourselves supply chain orchestrators, so we're trying to do that. And the second is automation. I think humans are not good at some things that are demanded for supply chain, like follow-ups, for example, or documentation, things like that. And machines are much better. So I think automation would be the second one.
Yeah, I actually really liked that point that you mentioned earlier about the humans not being good at follow-up and the ripple effect of that. Yep. I think everybody listening is going, oh, yep, that was me when I had a headache and didn't do that thing. And then, we know how the dominoes fall. What about tools or resources that can help people optimize their inventory and supply chain?
This is a segment that a lot of people use Excel, but Excel is really hard because Excel is limited in terms of the data that you can process. It gets impossible if you do it right. So I think you have to do, like, as I said, production management. Envo is an example. Freight forwarder, Flexport is an example. trucking, convoy is an example, fulfillment, delivery is an example. So if you have those tools, you're going to be able to have information, data coming in. On top of that, have a system like Flieber that is able to integrate that. You're going to be able to make very, very good decisions.
Awesome. And final question, sometimes the hardest. What's been your funniest moment while working within e-commerce?
Funniest moment. That's a good one. Okay. I can think of a bunch. And most of the ones that I think are related to the differences between the culture in China and the culture here in the US. But one of them, I think, is we had 2 warehouses at the time, and we always had people, missing from the warehouse. And many times I had to go to the warehouse and get pallets and put on inside of trucks. And I remember this time that I had a pallet that was very, very heavy, and I had to go up a ramp, and everything fell off the pallet and everything broke. So I don't know if it's funny, but it was tragic, but funny in hindsight. Also, another funny thing was when I was redoing the package sizes to reduce the package, the story that I told before. And I was sitting on the floor, literally sitting on the floor of the factory, covered with boxes, and all these people in the factory trying to help me in Chinese. And I didn't speak Chinese, so I had to be talking with them, in a sign language that we would come up at the moment. So, and also, of course, eating, silk bugs and stuff to create close relationships with the suppliers. So it's a huge cultural difference also that I deeply appreciate. By the way, I loved all my experiences in China. So I think all of those things today make it funny. At the time were challenging, but today are funny.
Yeah, I'd be so curious. Like, I almost wish I could just have a collection of all the different players in the e-commerce space that have had to deal with Chinese suppliers and see like, all right, guys, just go for it. What have your experiences been like? Let's just like cross compare. Who's got the best stories? Who's got the biggest challenges? Yeah, I'm sure
That
there
would
would
be
be
funny.
a
A lot of funny stories out of that for sure.
a lot of reminiscing, I'm sure. Well, this has been awesome, Fabricio. I'm really excited to have you on today. I think we are in such a crazy time period. Obviously, the supply chain, we're seeing this play out in our lives far beyond what's happening on Amazon or within e-commerce. This is just a part of our daily lives now. So the fact that you've been able to come on and break down, what it means for sellers and everybody in the just kind of the general world has been great. So thank you so much for bringing that to us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed your questions. I think they were very clever. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, if anyone wants to find you and connect with you, where can they reach you?
Yeah, you can go to flieber.com, Flieber.com, and you can reach out. There's a contact there. I received myself the contact. So if you send through that channel, you will get to me.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you again for coming on and looking forward to seeing what you guys get up to next.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've walked away with a bit of new insight that'll help you in your digital entrepreneurship journey. If you enjoyed the episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To learn more about businesses available for sale at Empire Flippers, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.